Hello, welcome to PCMag Live. I'm Dan Costa. He is Sasha Segan. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to break down the top tech news of the day, show you one cool thing from the lab, and get to some of your reader questions. Let's start with the big news. It was a very big day at the FCC. They made major announcements on net neutrality and on the wireless auction spectrum. That's the wireless spectrum auction that's coming up in 2015. Let's start with the net neutrality rules, guidelines, requests for comment. There really is not a lot of actual rulemaking in this set of recommendations.
Yeah, basically the FCC kind of punted to the public and said, we have an 80-page request for comment. It's all up in the air. How do you want your internet to be structured in the future? This is an incredible opportunity for us. Unfortunately, it's also an incredible opportunity for Verizon and Comcast multi-billion-dollar lobbying arms. So we all have to get online, get into the FCC's comment system, and say that we want one of two things. We want either real competition in home broadband, which we don't have now, or the monopoly broadband providers need to be common carrier regulated.
And there is this one thing, I mean, so, net neutrality is a concept, it's an all or nothing concept. Basically what they're doing is saying, well, you know what, we have to look at this and we are willing to consider allowing some companies to pay for faster access. Right. Pay for faster connections.
And the FCC is saying that, oh yeah, we'll make sure that there's robust speeds even on the slower connections, but you all know
he sounds just like that.
Yeah, you all know that's complete nonsense, right? You all know that when he says, oh yeah, we'll make sure there's robust speeds for the people who don't pay, that totally means nothing, right?
They say that they will not support anything that slows down internet connections for consumers, but they will allow for vendors to speed up internet connections. Yeah. Which doesn't make any sense.
Expect the worst. Now, there was another big FCC ruling yesterday involving the 600 megahertz spectrum auctions for next year. And without going too into spectrum geekery, what matters here is that the structure of these auctions basically determine whether Sprint and T-Mobile will be viable competitors in the future. So this is really, really important for anyone who thinks about wireless competition at all. The good news is that the FCC developed rules that say that if the auctions reach a certain price threshold, which they almost certainly will, then a certain amount of spectrum will be set aside for basically Sprint, T-Mobile, and rural carriers. This is because in the 700 megahertz spectrum auctions a couple of years ago, Verizon and AT&T basically bought up all the good spectrum, and that's part of why Sprint and T-Mobile are having a lot of the coverage problems they are today.
This is a good move, and I think it's going to be good for competition. The one caveat is that if Sprint does buy T-Mobile, which they've been expressed interest in doing, this all goes out the window, and they're going to revisit these rules, and they may unlock some of that reservation.
Right, and I love that because anything that makes it more difficult for Sprint and T-Mobile to merge is good for America.
That's your opinion. That's Sasha's strongly held opinion. Also in the news, and this actually affected us directly as well, Adobe Creative Cloud went down for 27 hours. Now, if you had it installed and you were already logged in, you could continue to work, but anything you needed to do to interact with that cloud, which is basically anything you need to do, downloading fonts, uploading art, publishing digital editions. We were not able to publish a digital edition because the cloud was down for us. This is a huge deal, and it undermines cloud computing as a concept.
Yeah, and this is, people who use Adobe products have often used Adobe products for decades. And they've used Adobe products locally for decades. And they don't understand why they have to move to this subscription product. And Adobe is not offering a local product anymore. So there's a lot of angry people out there who just think that this proves to them why cloud computing sucks. And Adobe's not doing a very good job of arguing otherwise.
No, and this comes on the tail of they had a massive security breach last year, one of the largest security breaches of usernames and passwords ever in the history of the internet. That was on Adobe's too. They've got to fix their back end if they're going to be a cloud-centric company.
I bet today there's a ton of people bidding up copies of Adobe CS6 on eBay. That was the last version of the Adobe suite that did not require all this cloud mishigas.
Find somebody who is not participating in all this cloud mishigas, and that's former head of the Department of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. I heard about this years ago, that she did not use email. I didn't really believe that. Turns out, literally in her entire time in office, she has not sent a single email. And if you file a Freedom of Information Act request, you will get nothing back in return.
Yeah, this is not George H.W. Bush at the supermarket checkout scanner, ooh, I don't know how to use technology, not using email. This is, I'm not using email because I don't want to leave a paper trail. So it's kind of brilliant and kind of evil.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, just imagine what would happen if none of our public officials used email. If they were operating in a world where they wanted to keep all of their documents, all their communications secret. I don't think that's a government that we want to have, and especially for an agency like the Department of Homeland Security, where we need some transparency.
I completely agree. But yeah, I don't really know where to go with that.
She's not in office anymore. Let's move on to our reader question. Our reader question comes in. We take them via Facebook, via email, on Twitter. This question comes in from Gibbs, and they want to know, I don't know if it's a man or woman, how do I tell the FCC to keep the internet open and prevent big companies from shoving us into the slow lane? I think we know what that comment, which side of the fence that comment's going to come down on.
Yeah.
But how do they make that comment?
Okay, you go to www.fcc.gov/comments, and you click on the link that says 14-28. Okay, go to fcc.gov/comments, click on 14-28, and that'll open up a form, and you can enter your comment right there. There are 21,000 comments already, but we need 200,000 comments. We need 2 million comments to go up against the big dollar lobbyists from the monopoly internet providers.
This is going to be a long process. The comments will be open for 120 days, so I think you should get your comment in right now, but there will be time to go back and forth on this. This is going to be a long process, and we're going to need those comments in order to actually move the needle here. Let's move on to one cool thing. We test thousands of products here in our lab in New York City. Every day we take one thing off the shelf and show it to you on air. Today's one cool thing is the Moto E. Now, this is a very unusual phone, Sasha. It looks just like an ordinary Android handset. Why is it not just an ordinary Android handset?
It's not an ordinary Android handset because it costs $130 unlocked. And now the world is full of $130 unlocked phones, but unlike the vast majority of $130 unlocked phones, this one is sturdy. It's well built, it has decent performance, it has a nice screen. The operating system, which is basically stock Android 4.4, works well. So what you have here is a lot of value at $130.
With no contract.
With no contract.
That's the thing that everybody's used to paying $200 for a phone, but with a 2-year contract.
Now, there are some downsides. For instance, there's no LTE. It works with the AT&T and T-Mobile networks, but only on 3G. The camera, not great. Okay, the processor, it's fast enough for most of the things you want to do, but yeah, there's some jitteriness and some transitions.
Who's the target market here for a phone like that?
Well, globally, I mean, there's a huge target market in developing countries. Countries like most of Latin America, where the average income's a little lower than the US, but they still want a decent phone at a good price. Here in the US, for instance, Motorola was talking about this being a great first phone for teens, tweens, families, because the family can get an inexpensive prepaid plan or add this on a line. It's a nice enough phone that a kid won't feel embarrassed by having it, but it's a cheap enough phone that the parent won't feel stressed out about possibly breaking it.
Very cool. You can read our full review on PCMag.com. That's been PCMag Live for today. Tune in next week. We'll have a brand new show for you.